Hi, I'm Will. That got me to talking about Sprites because I did like one GameJam, so I'm going to try and talk about this. So one thing, so just a quick recap. I've done stuff like this. It's mainly pixel art, mainly because if you want to make something fast, it's really blooming handy to just kind of get something fast and just do it nice. Other art styles are great, but if you're not very good at art to start off with, it can be a bit daunting to be like given Photoshop or Creator and just be told, okay, make a masterpiece and stick it on. Most often than not, pixel art works most times. Yeah, it looks rather nice in some respects. Yeah, nothing really professional. Played about a bit of YouTube, but programming-wise, I have no bloody idea how to use it. No idea. And mainly, the tools I use are mainly Creator, which is a free open source photo editor, image editor. It's very good for pixel art. It's fantastic. It's like Photoshop for free. And Sprite, which is very good for pixel art, lovely pixel art tools, but it's pretty useless for everything else. It's not really a theory. I'm just going to talk a wee bit about pixel art. So why pixels? As I've said, they're pretty easy to crank out if you can get a method going pretty well. Maintaining wise, it's quite easy to just if you say, oh no, something's out of line or something's wrong colour, it's quite easy to just go with a paint bucket and edit it. It's rather good in that respect. Reusability wise, like in the GameJam, well, not the hack Sheffield thing that we just did, I was the artist for that, and I made 2 character models, and then I just recolored them and changed the dimensions a bit, and that made them independent characters. So in regards to pixel art, it's very easy to reuse stuff, and if you've got limited time, that's really, really nice. It's very effective across all platforms, so I mean, it's as long as you scale it up, it's no real detriment to that. It's not mandatory, so as what's his face said, can't remember, very lovely art blog, he talked about you can use other art styles and that. You don't have to do many of the stuff that I'm going to tell you, but if you don't really know where to start, then pixel art is a nice place to start. And the limited palette, it's a great time saver because one, if you only have 4 colours to work with, then stylistically it can look pretty nice. And 2, you don't have to worry about consistency because you've got all your consistent elements there and sorted for you. Sprite sheets, so I mean, the name says it right there, it's a sheet of big sprites. Equal spacing, as in each frame, well, each sprite represents a frame, there's an animation. Each frame goes along left to right, top to bottom. Most of the time you'll have, for compact's sake, most often than not you'll have all the animations on one sprite sheet. So in the case, this is the Sprites for Braid. The top animations are like an idle animation where he's just like looking like he's breathing, so it's not just a static frame. And then you've got a bunch of frames of him running, which will, if you give those to a programmer or if you stick those in any engine like a Game Maker or Unity, then it's quite easy to say, okay, the sprites are this big, run through them when certain things happen. It makes it pretty nice to use rather than having a separate PNG or separate image file for each individual sprite. It's not very efficient. But yeah, saves time, space and effort. And as I said earlier, they're pretty easy to implement. And it makes sense that if you're doing something fairly low res and simple, maybe you don't want to get too complex with it. Like say if you've got something that's only like 8 pixels by 8 pixels, you don't have a great deal of freedom there. So if you're doing a walk animation, for example, as in the bottom right, you can just have 4 frames and you can cycle through those. You don't have to do a great deal of work. Whereas if you're scaling up something much more like high res, such as Braid, then naturally you may want to include a few more frames to get that nice smooth feeling, especially if you want to increase the frame rate. From a design point of view, I'm not necessarily going to tell you how to design these things because that's something you've got to decide yourself, like when you're doing all this. But so a few considerations is one, how much resolution do you need? How big do you want it to be? Like say if pixel art's your main, you want to do that, then naturally you don't want the sprites to be that big. it really is up to you in that respect, but size is definitely something that you need to consider, especially if you're going to be scaling it across different platforms or whatever. Colour. I highly recommend using like colour palette, just keeping colours really well. Back in the old days, like with the up there, that is the colour palette for the original NES, Nintendo Entertainment System, and they only had that many colours to play with, whereas nowadays you've got blooming loads. So I'd say take advantage of them, but it's nice to keep something, like keep the amount of colours you have small, because then you can, oh that's cool, just stylistically it looks rather nice and you don't have to worry about consistency. Dithering, bottom right there, it's a little technique where instead of having just blocks of shades, if you have like two colours, for example, black and white, it's a bit hard to do using blocks, just making grey, for example. So you mess about with them a little bit, just dot them, like tile them in a certain pattern. You can look up this later, but dithering, I highly recommend using it if you want to create shading, but you've only got certain colours to use. It looks nice sometimes. Outlines. So bottom left, this is a similar image, but one has an outline. One has an outline, one doesn't. If you're getting really small, like sprites on the screen, so say you haven't scaled them up, for example, then you've got a really messy, beautifully drawn background. Then a wee problem is that you don't know what it can be sometimes quite hard to keep track of what's what. So having, like, say, a black outline or an outline that somewhat matches, it's slightly darker than the rest of it, adds a bit of definition, means you can actually see the blooming thing, so you don't have to worry about like visibility, because in some cases that can be a bit of an issue. And experiment, for God's sake, like don't just like limit yourself to one thing. Just play about with it and see what works for you, what works for the game. Just do whatever you think is comfortable, like what benefits it, what looks really nice, because I don't really know what I'm talking about in that respect. Just do it yourself. Have a play, see what you can create. Backgrounds wise, I mean, realistically, you start simple. You don't want to be spending, as he said, spending loads of time on backgrounds. But if you can, then you may as well. But you've got to consider whether it is worth your time to spend about 6 hours working on a background that someone may not even pay attention to, if that's the case. Got to decide what kind of atmosphere you're trying to create. So if you're going for a dark scene, then obviously make it dark. Yeah, that's pretty self-explanatory. Reusability saves time. So if you want a day and a night background, why create different ones when you can just recolor the old one? Saves heaps of time. Don't have to faff about doing extra stuff. So in regards to, like, say, on the far right, that's a bunch of background sprites for Metroid Fusion, I believe, and certain like if you've got a bunch of animated elements, such as like windows and background stuff, then there's no point creating them as separate objects that you can. If the player isn't interacting with them in any way, then why create them as separate instances where you have to faff about with them, put them in? Why not just push them to the background and then animate the entire background? It just makes things a wee bit cleaner. And then for things that you actually interact with, like doors and like buttons, stuff like that, then you can do separate sprites for those objects. And if you're feeling a bit technical, which I've certainly not, because I have no idea how to do this, but if you can get it working, you can set it so you have multiple layers, multiple background layers, and then as the character moves, a thing called parallax happens, where the stuff closer to you moves faster than the stuff in the foreground. So then when you do move, it creates a lovely little 3D effect without having to faff about with matrices and 3D math stuff, which, if you can do it, then do it. But don't waste time, because you've only got 30 hours. Software. So I'm going to talk a wee bit about this. This little, these are all open source, by the way. I mean, I mentioned I used Sprite earlier, which version I got cost about 15 quid, but you really don't need to spend a great deal of money, well, any money at all, in fact, to get into this kind of thing. So Piskel, it's a web-based app, looks like so if you want to go to it. It's helpful for animation, so it's got some very nice animation tools. It's got onion skinning, it's got frames. If you're familiar with any kind of animation concepts, and those will be in there. It's a bit limited, but it's accessible from anywhere because it's web-based. You can download a non-online version, which is handy. However, the UI is a bit simplistic. Not a great deal of tools there if you want to do anything that isn't sprites, because, well, I say not sprites, anything that isn't, for your more high-res stuff, if you want to use some more advanced brushes, if you want to do some warping, just do a bit stuff which is a bit nicer and not confined to pixels, then it's not very good, because you have like a brush, and you have a pencil, and you have a razor, and you have little things like that. And when it comes to everything else, you've got nothing. So you may as well use a different tool. Other tools, Paint.net. Oh, that's been mentioned a couple of times. If you're using Microsoft Paint, then don't. Because it hasn't really got a great deal of tools. It's got layering. It's got you can customize your palette. So if you say want to use the original NES palette, for example, if you want to keep it truthful, then you can convert all that to a text file, import it in, and bang, got the palette for the old NES. If you want to stay truthful to that, it's got gradients. It's got a variety of features. It's good for photo edit. It's got a few nice photo editing features as well as stuff for basic drawing. Much better than Microsoft Paint, as I said. Palettes are easily customizable. Includes dithering tools. So as I say, if you want to create the sense of shading with only using 2 colours, then it's got all the little stuff for that. It likes functional ranks editing, and yeah, but GIMP, it's another free tool, never heard of it. It's in GNU, it's a Linux-based thing, I have no idea. But it just builds on what Paint already has and just gives you more of it. So more tools, more functionality, really powerful editing. There's loads of plugins that you can download to make it a wee bit better. Similar features to Photoshop a bit. But the user face can be god awful. Like it's just a nightmare to organise. I mean, I don't want to get my head around it. It's just too much faff. But I'd recommend using this tool, which is the one that I use. It's Krita, or Krita, depending how you pronounce it. I don't know how to pronounce it. But free, totally open source overlay here. You'd be able to see. Okay, so along the bottom here, you've got frames. Each frame is a separate drawing. Limited colour palette, as you see. You can play the animation. You can designate how long an animation wants to be. You can then export that into separate PNGs or sprite sheets, which saves you a lot of time, saves you a lot of scale, and it means you can just integrate it well with loads of stuff. As in, yeah, it's pretty nice. So, yeah. In regards to the limited colour palette, I'd say, I mean, you can have, there is a palette function on here somewhere, but just for like a quick tip, maybe while you're still drawing stuff, keep your palette like to the right side of it or somewhere, because then if you're using a paint drop tool, like on here it's control is the hotkey for paint tool, you can quickly like select colours on the fly and you can quickly edit stuff. But other than that, that's it. Yeah. I don't know.